Behavior change and habit formation are two of my favorite subjects because at the end of the day, if we want to be better, we need to behave differently. But getting ourselves or our team members to change, well, it's easier said than done. But today's guest is going to unlock the key to transformational behavior change so you and your team can adopt new ways of working. Today's guest is Jason Hreha. Jason is a behavioral scientist and entrepreneur who, after studying at Stanford and working in Fogg's behavior design lab, developed the behavioral strategy framework for business challenges. As CEO of Persona, he combines behavioral science assessments with rigorous vetting to connect companies with exceptional talent. Previously, as global head at Walmart, he established the first Fortune 100 behavioral science team. Jason is also the author of Real Change, a book redefining habit formation and personal growth. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Jason. Thank you so much for joining me today, Jason. I'm so excited to talk about habits. It is one of my mini obsessions, sciences that I go down the rabbit hole. And it's even extra special because you and I both trained under the same amazing Fogg. So I feel like we already are on the same wavelength around the importance of habits and so much of the habits, but you're really the expert here. So I'm excited to have you help us unpack habits which show up constantly in our lives every second of the day.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I think I want to start with this idea that I learned about on your website of habits versus transformative practices, because it was the first time I even had heard of the differences. And I think it's going to be really important to understand this before we dive into some of the other conversation topics I want to get to. So can you maybe explain what are habits and what are transformative practices and how are they the same or different? And how do we treat them the same or different?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a huge distinction that people conflate when they talk about habits or about changing their behavior in their own life to become a better person. I think most people just say the word habit to mean any behavior that they want to do regularly or somewhat regularly. But in the academic literature, a habit means something very different. It's a very specific thing, right? A habit is basically a semi-conscious or unconscious behavioral reflex that you do in the same context over and over again in response to, some trigger, some prompt or some trigger, right? It could be internal. So it could be just like an emotion. It could be a need, a desire. It could just be a trigger, like, for example, walking into a room, flicking on or off the light switch. That isn't a good example of a habitual behavior. It's a small, automatically triggered by the environment kind of semi/unconscious reflex. And that's what we talk about in the academic literature. But when people just talk about, hey, I want to form a new habit, I think they're generally referring to something very different. They're referring to generally a much more complex, large, challenging behavior that they struggle to do. And so I think that actually there's been a big problem because I think that people have gone to the academic literature and they've read about how are habits formed, how do you form a habit, what are the characteristics of a habit, and what strategies should you implement in order to build one into your life or to break one. Those tactics and strategies in the academic literature are referring to a very different type of behavior than the ones that most people want to create. And so I actually think that a lot of the tactics that people recommend for forming a new habit, like a new exercise habit or learning a new skill or just making yourself better in some way, I think that people are just teaching the wrong tactics for doing what people actually want to do. And so I wanted to come up with the distinction in my book and just in my work in general. And so the distinction I made was habits versus practices. And the reason in the book I call them transformative practices is that in general, in the self-help world or in the self-improvement world, people want to transform themselves and become better in some way. So I just put the word transformative on it. But really the fundamental distinction is habits versus practices. And I think actually that a lot of the tactics that are taught to create practices, which is what people really want. They don't want habits in the scientific sense of the term. They want new practices. And I think that a lot of the tactics people use are incorrect.
I think this distinction is so important. I'm so glad that you acknowledge this because so many of my clients, and even for myself, right, I think about I want to have a daily planning habit where I sit down at my desk and I plan my day. And I want to have a habit of making an agenda before every meeting. And I mean, I try very hard and I know some of the science around habits and still it doesn't just happen automatically. It happens because I put time on my calendar, because I put it on my to-do list, because I made it a priority. Even if it's something I do regularly, it doesn't quite feel the same as the automaticity of so many other habits that just happen without thinking. And it feels like the workplace is full of those, I need a new habit. I need a habit to make my to-do list for the morning. I need a habit of whatever it might be, checking in on each of my team members. And it sounds like those really aren't habits. Those are practices, and we need to treat them differently.
I think you should treat them differently. And I think the problem is people get hung up on a specific behavior. So for example, you hear it all the time where people say, hey, my New Year's resolution is I want to start running regularly. They pick a specific behavior, or I want to start meditating daily. They pick one behavior, they try to do it. For whatever reason, they struggle to do it. They just can't get it to work. And so they say, okay, well, let me use these different habit hacks or these different tactics or tricks in order to get myself to do this thing more often. But unfortunately, I think that those tactics would work for something very small that is automatable, but it's not really going to work for something that's much larger, harder, and something that requires a lot of effort and willpower. I think you need a different set of tactics for that. And my whole point of view is that actually the most important thing that people can do is to pick the right behavior in the first place. So, for example, if somebody wants to start running or meditating, why do they want to do that? You're not running for no reason at all. It's probably because you want to get more fit. Maybe you want to lose some weight. Maybe it's just stress relief. And if those are your goals, there are hundreds or thousands of ways you could accomplish that same goal. There are thousands of behaviors you could do to get the same thing. So instead of running, which you obviously dislike because you can't get yourself to do it, instead of doing that, you could, go swimming, start playing tennis. You could, join a soccer team, build a gym in your garage and start doing some weights there every day. There's so many different ways in order for you to get the same goal. So my entire approach is really all about behavioral selection. I call it behavior matching, where it's matching the right activities to you, given your unique characteristics, strengths, life situation, etc. While I agree with a lot of what BJ says, I think he and I have a slightly different approach here when it comes to habit formation. And my approach is all about doing a bit more self-exploration and doing a bit more iteration to find the exact right match for you. It's more of a matching model versus okay, let's make these environmental tweaks, or let me try and increase motivation or increase ability, etc. My whole point of view is let's just match you to the right activity in the first place, and then the rest should take care of itself.
Oh my gosh, how simple it would be if we all just knew exactly what the right activities were,
Sure.
And then they could just take care of themselves. That sounds magical. I'm wondering if you have a story either from yourself or from some clients of what does that look like from I picked the wrong thing and I'm really struggling to I figured out what the right thing is and now it works so much more smoothly.
Yeah, well, so you mentioned earlier, you're talking about kind of setting up a daily plan or kind of getting more organized, figuring out a way of just kind of operating more according to a plan. I'm not a very organized person. I do think it's largely just my personality. I do think a lot of it was just, we all kind of are, nature, nurture. Personality is significantly genetic. It's partly environmental, but it's significantly genetic. I just don't think I got those genes. I just don't think I'm an organized person. I've never been organized. I've tried a lot of different approaches in order to follow a daily plan, get better at putting things in my calendar, having to-do lists, etc. Nothing really works for me. And so my approach actually to dealing with that, I wanted to at some point start putting everything in my calendar. I wanted to start kind of planning longer term projects. I wanted to start keeping regular to-do lists. I'm terrible at that. And so what my approach was actually is, okay, I realize this about myself. I realize that this is my personality. I'm, in my late 30s at this point. I've never been able to get this to work. What could I actually do? I got an assistant. So I got an assistant to help me with that. So that was my kind of behavioral strategy in order to rectify this kind of weakness in my skill set, this weakness in my habits or my practices, whatever you want to call it at this point. But that was my approach. And so I actually run a company that we provide a lot of assistance to different executives, startup founders, etc. So my main company persona, we do this. And as part of it, we actually do personality testing on individuals in order to understand their strengths and weaknesses. And so if somebody's applying to be an executive assistant with us that we would match with a client, we are looking at, are they organized? Are they going to be really good at all these sorts of activities that kind of our founders need help with? So that was my personal approach to dealing with it. And that's made a massive difference in my life.
Wow. I love that the solution can actually be to have someone help you with this thing instead of you have to fix yourself in some contortion way. So amazing. And clearly, obviously, there was a big goal behind this. As you mentioned before, you have to know the purpose, right? The purpose was not because you wanted to live by a calendar or have a long to-do list that would stress you out, right? The purpose was to be more effective, productive, et cetera, I'm sure. I love this so much. So I'm wondering with the teams, right? Sometimes we are collectively trying to do a new practice. Like I'm thinking about with my team, we use a shared task manager, and I really want everyone to put all of their tasks in there so we can all see what's going on, to update it every evening so that we can all see what's got done and, people are waiting on different things. And so that might be a situation where you have less choice around the behavior matching because it's a tool that I've already selected that we're using and I like it and it works for me. And so I'm like, everybody else just use it. Any thoughts on like what we can do to help our team members for whom that behavior may or may not be the easiest practice? Or if we find ourselves in that situation where our boss or other team members have asked us to, participate in certain ways that feel like this practice is, killing me on the inside.
So everybody has different strengths and weaknesses. That's my fundamental belief, is that we all kind of have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. I do think a lot of these things are extremely hard to change, if not impossible to change, as an adult. And so I think that it's really all about being a realist and being very practical. And so in a situation like that, let's say you have a team of 5 or 6 people. Let's say 2 or 3 of the people are regularly putting all the information into the project management system or the to-do system that your team uses. The other people aren't. They're really struggling with that. What I would do in a situation like that, if I was the boss, what I would say is, okay, listen, you guys are obviously struggling with this. Does anybody on the team want to volunteer to be kind of the scribe or kind of like help check in with everybody on the team every day just to make sure that everything's kind of up to date and put into the system so that we can all be on the same page? There's no judgment here. I understand that we all have different things that we like, different things that we dislike, or we have our own strengths and weaknesses. Would anybody be willing to do that? And if nobody's willing to do that, maybe I could volunteer myself if I'm on the more organized side. If not, I could nominate somebody, say, hey, would you be willing to do this? I'd really appreciate it. Like, you're so good at inputting everything there. Could you just do a quick check-in with all the team members every day? So I would try to leverage the strengths of the individuals on the team and the people that are really exemplary at this, just to really get them to help the other members of the team with areas where they're weaker. So that would be my approach as the manager. My approach as an individual employee dealing with this, where I just can't really do this, is I would actually have a candid conversation with the manager, with the boss. And I would say, hey, listen, this isn't going to make me sound good here necessarily, but I've struggled with being organized for a long time. It's just kind of not how I'm wired. It's just not my personality. I really I'm trying hard here, but it gets to the end of the day, or I'm at home with my family or with my friends, and I remember, oh my God, I didn't update it. And this just happens to me over and over again. Is there any way that you can help me out with this? Or is there a way that we can actually set up a system to have like a scribe on the team who's kind of responsible for just checking in with us each day, making sure we're all on the same page? So I really think in that situation, it's all about, as the individual employee, kind of asking for help and leveraging the strengths of the other members of the team. And then as the manager, it's about doing that proactively.
I'm thinking about my husband, who I've been trying to get onto a digital task list forever because he loves his pen and paper. And it works really well for him. The problem is only when he leaves it at his desk and then he's gone and he's like, oh, I can't remember what's on it. Or he thinks of something when he's not around and then he forgets to write it down, right? Which is why I'm always like, get on this digital task system. And then it's with you all the time. And everybody, he, for whatever reason, cannot create the behaviors and those practices of putting things into an app and then checking them off from there. He just loves his pen and paper. And so I'm thinking about even something as simple as having him take a photo of it and email it to me every day. Not that I need to know his to-do list, but as a team member, right? If you're someone who loves pen and paper and you're just it takes me too long to type things up, to find things in the app, it's confusing and I just can't get myself to do it. I could totally be yeah, just take a photo of your to-do list with all the things crossed off and send it to me. And then I will know where everything stands and I can update the app, or we don't even need the app anymore now if we just all kind of know where we're at. So I love this idea of be creative and ask for help and advocate for yourself, because it's hard to do that in the workplace, but it makes such a difference when we as managers can be open that different people work differently, and we as employees can ask for help and what we need so that we can get to the bigger picture goal, which is not that the app is updated. The goal is that everyone's aligned, going back to your previous point.
I think that with things like organization, updating a project management system, things like that, it's very easy to get if you're a team member or even if you're a manager, I think it can be very easy to just reflexively become judgmental and say, why isn't this person doing this? What's up with that? But I think it's such a bad place to be. And I think that the key thing is just to respect and to understand that everybody's a mixed bag. We all are. We all have our strengths. We all have our weaknesses. We're all wired a certain way. And so just kind of understanding that, respecting it, and working with it rather than trying to force change, I think is just an important mindset. So that's number one. And number two, what you were mentioning with your husband, if he's like really into just writing on paper, just using a pen to write things down, I think, he could try things too. Like there's those pad that feels like paper that kind of uploads things to the cloud automatically. I'm sure that there are a variety of different apps, even with an iPad. I'm sure that there are note-taking apps where everything is synced to a common system. Like there's that OneNote app from Microsoft. Maybe if you guys shared a OneNote and he could write in there so he could get an approximation of the handwriting experience. My belief is that there are just there are nearly infinite number of ways to accomplish a given goal. And there's so many different activities and behaviors we can all do. I think most of us explore too little. We iterate and we explore and we try too few things. And so I think that in general, in a situation like that, what I would suggest is, with him, just like see, are there other options out there that like give him that same experience that also work for you?
I have an ink pad. I have a Remarkable, and I love it so much. And I've never even thought to be like, why don't you get one too? I love this idea now. Okay, let's go back for a second to kind of the behavior matching piece of this. And, if you're running a team and you want to introduce new practices, should we be talking with our team about this before, right? Like it's one thing to say, this is what we're doing. Like we're using this tool. I've already been using it. You're a new team member. You got to use it. Very different from, hey, we're struggling with our communication. Like what are the practices that we might want to implement to help us be better in touch with each other, to make sure that we're staying aligned as things are unfolding, to make sure that we're all focused on the right work? Are these conversations we should be having collectively and then figuring out what are the right collective practices?
Yeah, I think that in general, that's a good approach. I do think it depends also on how well you understand your team members, how long you've been working with them, how well you understand them. And I also do think behavior matching, behavioral selection, I do think it's a skill that you develop over time. When I first started doing applied behavioral science work, it was really hard for me to think about behaviors. Like I remember when I first started working with BJ and we were talking about behavior change, I remember I found it actually even really hard to think about, like, interesting. So what are wellness behaviors? Like, what are all the different things a person can do? And how do I what is the specific behavior that exactly we're trying to isolate and influence here? And what are the variables involved? And I just found it very hard to think about. It sounds simple now in this conversation with you, but I remember at the time it was just a mind warp for me. And so I do think that thinking clearly about behavior and thinking about individuals and kind of their strengths and weaknesses and their personalities in a very clear and well-defined way. And then thinking about, okay, what behaviors would be good for this individual versus that individual. I do think it's a skill that you grow over time the more you do this. And so I think that it really all depends on, as a manager, your understanding of your team, your behavior matching, let's call it skill, that muscle, is it strong or not? And if it's really strong and you understand your team really well, I think, yeah, you can also have a conversation with them, but I think that you're going to have a much higher hit rate just coming in saying, hey, everybody, I know, we've been working together for a while. I think this would be the best thing for us. Here's my plan. Here's what I propose. What do you think? I think that if you're strong in those areas, that works really well. Otherwise, I think you can just have an open-ended conversation and just say, hey, everybody, we're not on the same page. We're a remote team. Let's say we're a little bit disorganized. You're working on that, but so-and-so is also working on that. And it doesn't seem like we're fully aligned here. What can we do as a group in order to get on the same page, in order to build it out? Like, what has worked for you in the past? What have you struggled with? And to have a conversation. But once again, it all depends, I think, on a few different variables here.
Well, this feels like ripe for a group brainstorm that gets really specific into what are the exact behaviors? What are the specific practices? What are the things that you've done in the past that have worked well for you? And if everyone is generating those, likely we'll find something that starts to feel like, yeah, as a team, we all like that one. That all feels good. I think I can do that too. And gives you a good starting place. But going back to the comment you made about we kind of don't explore enough, we kind of pick something and go with it. Yeah, using your team to really explore various behaviors is probably a great place to start. All right, I want to talk for a second though about the opposite, which is I explore so many behaviors that I never pick one because this is my problem. I'm like, ooh, there's a new way to do this. I'm going to try it this way. Oh, there's a better way to do it. I'll try it that way, which can be its own problem because then you never get into a rhythm of practice where it's something that maybe doesn't quite become a habit because it still takes some intention, but it becomes almost like a ritual that you or it's just built into the way that you work?
I personally don't think it's a huge problem. I think, once again, going back to what I was saying earlier, I think we're all wired quite differently. There is actually a personality trait called openness to new experience. That's one of the big 5 personality traits. And people who are very high in that like exploring, they like trying new things. They're novelty seekers in terms of ideas, technologies, etc. And I think that if that's kind of the way you're wired, if that's who you are, I don't think you're going to suddenly start to become extremely more traditional and more, find a good thing and stick with it in terms of your behavior. I just don't think that's realistic. And so I think that just kind of roll with it. I mean, that's who you are. Embrace it. If you do think that there are actual tangible costs that you're paying because you're not sticking with things enough, then I would tackle those on a case-by-case basis and think through, just kind of given who I am, given my exploratory nature, et cetera, like how would I handle these things? And I would also say that I'm a big believer that the reason that we have brains, the reason we're adaptable, the reason that we can we're not just reflex-oriented creatures that just are born with a certain set of predefined reflexes like a lot of animals. The reason that we have this very adaptable, amazing kind of general purpose behavior system, our brains, is because, behaviors are used on a case-by-case basis in order to solve specific problems or, satisfy certain needs in our life at a given time. And the fact that you're adaptable and that you always love exploring and just trying to find new horizons, I think that's a good thing. And it's well suited to you. And so I'm not a big believer in, okay, I want to start doing this and I'm going to do it the rest of my life. I think that's just a very inflexible, almost inhuman way of behaving, right? Really what you want to do is, okay, I'm going to start meditating now. I'm going to do this. Oh, I really enjoy it. This is really great. I'm getting a lot from it. It feels good. It's making my life better. If at a certain point you say, oh, I'm kind of bored of this and it's not really providing me as much anymore, that's totally fine to, set that aside, right? Just because you picked up a hammer one day and needed it for a housing project doesn't mean that you have to keep holding it and using it every day the rest of your life, right? Pick it up for the project that you need or for the reasons that you think you need it. Use it for as long as necessary and then discard it and go on to something new. So I think that if that's how you're you naturally operate and the way that you work, I would roll with it and I wouldn't feel bad about it.
I want to say 2 things on that. So one is, right, it becomes very clear using an example like exercise, right? If the purpose is to be healthy, you don't have to do the same exercise routine for your whole life, right? You can have a period where you're really into yoga and then a period where you're like, I'm kind of done with yoga, but now I'm going to go running. And then the next period is I'm going to do a CrossFit thing, because the goal that you have, the purpose stays the same, but how you get there changes. And so that's, I think, very helpful for me to just think about all of the times I'm trying something new. It's all in service of the bigger picture goal. And so that's okay. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I was thinking about in the workplace is, for me, one of the ways that I have managed this tendency is to rotate practices amongst a very small set of practices. So when I get kind of tired of one, I switch to a new one. And sometimes it looks like in our meetings, because we have the same meetings over and over again, the same approaches, they're on the calendar, they're on repeat. And sometimes I'm just tired of these meetings.
Totally.
And it's a great chance to say, well, let's just take a step back. Let's redesign this meeting. It can still be the same outcome we're driving towards in the meeting, but we can use a different way of engaging. We could structure our agenda differently. We could meet at a different time of day or a different day of the week. And so we're just bringing a different energy. And so you can kind of rotate through different practices or kind of switch things up a little bit without totally throwing everything out. So just wanted to offer those 2 things. Now we actually have to wrap up. So Jason, Can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
One of the best managers I ever worked for, his name is Jamie Iannone. He's currently the CEO of eBay. And I worked with him at Walmart. And he was so great in so many different ways. Number one, just absolutely brilliant, so smart. One of the best strategic minds I've ever encountered in my whole life. And he was so open-minded and so open to hearing new ideas and to hearing you out. And he really had just such a great collaborative way of working that I would leave every single meeting I had with him just so energized and just feeling so good and so optimistic about the company, but also so excited about the projects I was working on. And I really wanted to impress him. He just instilled this desire to just do good work for him. He's just a great leader. And of course, he has a lot of great skills that I'm sure he picked up throughout his career, but just psychologically, the way that he just kind of made me feel supported and heard, and the way that he collaborated with me and would take my ideas and up level them, yes, and kind of almost like the improv type thing, just spectacular. So
What a simple thing that we can all do. Just say yes and. Love it. And where can people learn more about you? Remind us the name of your book and where they can get a copy of it and all that jazz.
Yeah, so I have a website. It's thebehavioralscientist.com. My book is on Amazon. It's called Real Change. My last name is it's a strange last name. It's Hreha. So Jason Hreha. If you just type that in on Amazon, you can find it. And I think it's a unique book. It does have this different behavior matching perspective. I think it's a quite different perspective than the other stuff that you read about out there. And those are probably the two best places to find me. I have a company. It's called Persona, personatalent.com if any of you ever need any remote talent recruited for you. And that's where you can find me.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on today. Thank you for geeking out with me around habits and practices and all this fun stuff that I just get to think about all the time.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So great to meet you.